consider the market for a type of smartphone that can do a little bit of magic, which is basically different from what currently the smartphones can do. Right, so then the market for smartphones here, for this type of smartphone, is in equilibrium, and its equilibrium price is £500 a unit. And at this price, currently 100 units a week is sold. Let's say there are people who are willing to pay more than £500 for the smartphone, and there are also people who are not willing to pay for the smartphone, or willing to pay a little bit more but not much, basically. And you could see that sometimes people queuing up in front of Apple stores or Samsung stores or Microsoft stores to buy this new model. So let's assume that there are people there who would like to get hold of this model as one of the first customers, and they're willing to pay a lot more than what it costs basically in the market. That person is willing to pay that much, let's say this point here. So this is, let's say, something like £900. Yeah, so this person has a budget of £900, and he is willing to basically pay that much. But obviously when he is in the market, he or she is gonna pay the equilibrium price. So the market equilibrium price is currently 500. Now the difference between what they are willing to pay and what they actually pay is £400. So that's their surplus. So let's call it S1 400. That's their surplus. The next person may be willing to buy this phone for a high price, but not as much as 900. So they may be willing to pay, let's say 890 or something like that. But when they go to market, they also pay what the market price is. So that's £500. So that's S2. Let's say this is little less than £900. So that's going to be 90. Let's say this, yeah, £10 difference there, and so on and so forth. So there are bunch of people here along the demand curve who are willing to pay this different prices for this next additional unit of this smartphone. So if we kind of draw these lines to represent the difference between what they're willing to pay and what the market price is, or in fact what they actually pay, then this gives us this triangle. So I'm gonna let me shade this first. So this whole triangle now is representing the consumer surplus or welfare of the customers in the market for this smartphone. So we sum up all or every single customer's surplus, and we come to total consumer surplus, or simply consumer surplus. So let me just label that. So this thing is representing the consumer surplus, right? This is not a profit, basically. It's basically benefit, or kind of what we gain as benefit after we buy the bargain, or we think that is a bargain price, so we're willing to pay more, but we get a bargain. So we value this sort of unit of mobile phone, you know, highly. Basically we value it higher than what it is now currently costing in the market, right? So the value we put on the mobile phone is higher than what we pay. So we have that bargain, and the difference between this what we want to pay and what we pay is basically surplus. Or simply, if it makes sense to you, or makes it easier to understand, you can think of this as a benefit, yeah, as a benefit, yeah. So there are also people who will pay exactly £500, yeah. So that person is there. Their consumer surplus will be zero, obviously, yeah. So because they are paying what they wanted to pay, and that is equal to the market price or market equilibrium price, yeah. Okay, so that's consumer surplus. Now, in the market, usually you have consumers and producers, yeah. So what about the producers? Do they gain from, you know, the transactions? Yes, they do. So the 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 first producer, or the producer of the first phone, or this, let's say, seller of the first phone, basically was willing to sell the mobile phone for this price, apparently. So let's say this is something like around 400. Yeah, so around £400. No, it's 100. I'm sorry. Yeah, so that's 100. So around £100. But they're got for the mobile phone £500, right? So the market is basically paying this mobile phone £500. So their surplus now, so the supplier's surplus is now 400 as well. So this is the difference between what they receive, that's £500, but what they were willing to accept. So they think that their mobile phone costs about £100, and they are actually willing to accept that £100 if somebody is offering to buy the mobile phone for that price, for the lower price. But obviously it's trading in the market, so they trade at the equilibrium price, and that's their benefit. Yeah, so the difference between what the price is and what they are willing to accept in the market basically produces surplus, and the next producer is willing to supply the next unit for a little bit higher price, and so there is this sort of S2 390, let's say. You know, these shouldn't be, or doesn't have to be, the same values. It could be different values, but just for the sake of simplicity, I'm just choosing exactly the same values. Yeah, so the shade, or this area here, shade, I just shaded in red, or sort of highlighted here in the red, doesn't have to be equal to the area in the producer surplus, yeah, triangle. So it doesn't have to be, but just for the simplicity, I'm just using these figures. Okay, so I'm gonna draw these lines to represent the difference between what the next supplier is willing to accept and what they actually accept. So they are accepting, or they're selling the products at higher price than what they thought that they would be willing to accept. And last phone is sold for exactly £500, and that producer was willing to accept that £500. So their surplus is 0. Okay, so this is now, let me just label this. This is now producer surplus. So this whole area is now representing the producer surplus. And in equilibrium, when the market is in free equilibrium based on supply and demand forces, we say that the market is efficient. It's allocating the resources efficiently, and both agents, buyers and sellers, maximize their surplus. So the sum of the two, the sum of the red area and then blue area, now is called a total surplus. Yeah, so it's the welfare, yeah, welfare in this case of the two agents, so consumer surplus plus producer surplus. Basically, with these concepts, we do welfare analysis. Let's draw the demand and supply diagram one more time. So that's that. We have now original supply and original demand lines. So let's label them properly now. So that's demand, supply, and we have our original 100 unit quantity per week being consumed, and we have this price still equilibrium, original equilibrium price being £500. Now let's say that the government is going to impose a tax of, let's say, £50 per unit sold. So every unit sold will generate £50 revenue for the government. And as you know, when the tax is imposed on suppliers, usually this is treated as some sort of incentive to produce less, because it's a cost of production of supplying the additional unit. What happens is that when the cost of production increases, we will see that the supply usually shifts left by the, or increases, or shifts upwards, I should say, by the amount of the tax. So let's say this is our new supply. Yeah, so this is our new supply with tax. Let's label it S1. This used to be S0 then, yeah. We have a new equilibrium price now, right there, and then the quantity. So let's put the price for quantity first. Let's say this is 90 units now. Suppliers are not willing to supply that additional 10 units at all. This with the high prices, and with the high price now, the equilibrium price will be different though. It won't be £550. Not all of the tax amount is going to be reflected on the equilibrium price. That's because demand is elastic, yeah, here. So it depends on the, so how much is paid by the consumers depends on the elasticity of the demand. for this product. So let's say this is 520-ish, yeah, 520 here. So the equilibrium price is 520. What happened to our consumer surplus then? Well, this is our price line. So this is equilibrium price line. Consumer surplus is then the area here. Yeah, so all of these is consumer surplus. It used to be a little bit longer than that, right? So it would come to this point here, to this line. But now that the tax basically distorted the market's natural operations and basically reduced or increased the price as a result, and also reduced the welfare of the customers. Yeah, so not everyone will be able to afford the mobile phone anymore. Now, how about the producer surplus? Well, producer surplus is then what they receive and what they're willing to receive. Yeah, so it's the difference between what they receive and what they're willing to receive. Now, what they receive here depends on the tax size. So right now, what they receive is, let me just, for this unit is this amount. So let's put this. So this distance here, although it's wider than this one here, is 50 here. So 50 pounds. So that's 520 minus 50 is 470. 470. Let me just write it properly here. 470. 470. Right. So that's the price for that unit they receive, and their surplus is then this area here. Yeah. So so there are suppliers who are still willing to receive lower, or willing to supply the product at lower prices, and but they're just receiving now 470, not 500 anymore. Yeah, so their surplus has also shrank. Yeah, so that's also not good from the perspective of the suppliers too. So now let me do this. Now I'm gonna if I can do small erase. Oh, yeah, I can erase this. Okay, that's good. Now okay, let's now start again. Now the tax, as you can see, distorted the market and reduced our consumer surplus, also the producer surplus here. Producer surplus. What happens to the middle part here and then this part? Basically, the middle part, it's not the topic that I wanted to cover, but since we're looking at the tax as distortion to the market, this part I need to explain this. Yeah, so this part is the revenue for the government. Yeah, so it's they basically receive 50 pounds from every unit of this mobile phone sold. So let's say 90 sold every week, so 90 units are sold, times it by 50, so that's their tax revenue. That's not total revenue, so this is tax revenue for the government. That is that much. So they receive that much of the surplus that used to be shared. You know, it used to be shared between producers and suppliers, if you remember, right? So if we let the free market do its job, then it would have been the price would have been 500 pounds, and this part, so it will be right there, 500 pounds, and the top would have been shared between by the consumers, and the bottom part of that rectangle would have been a producer surplus, right? But not anymore, because of the government's bite of this cake. Yeah, so think of this as a cake. This slice, basically the long rectangle slice, is government's share, and this is consumers' kind of share of the cake, and this is producers' kind of share. Yeah, but now, as you can see, there is something there that hasn't been accounted for, and this is this area here. This area basically not benefiting anyone. This is not captured by anyone. Government is just capturing this area. Yeah, this area, the revenue. The buyers or customers capturing this area, the yellow that I am shading here. So just to differentiate between these areas. And producers are kind of capturing this area. Oops, I chose the wrong color, so it's this area here. Yeah, so that's producer surplus here all the way up, and no one is capturing this area. This is no one's benefit. It's simply called dead weight loss. This is the loss of the welfare, dead weight loss, and no one is capturing it. So taxation, as a result, as you can see, is a distortion to the market, and we basically use the simple tools, consumer surplus and producer surplus, to analyze the market.